4 or 5, I'm in there.
Oh, yes. No. I did count you too, Commissioner Salian. So with you, it's 1, 2, 4, 5.
Oh, okay.
And I'm here too. This is Chuck. Looks like my wife's name is showing up here, but Kumi, but it's me.
Hello.
Hey.
So as points of order again, just to facilitate this, let's do the muting mics and raising hands again. It worked really well last time, and it kind of avoided any cross speaking or over speaking, which kind of seems to have a delay sometimes, right?
Yes. Do you want the physical raising of hand like this, or the icon raising hand?
You know, I have, for some reason, I can't see everyone here.
You can go to gallery view.
Yeah, I have it here. Okay. You know what? Now I can see everyone. So we can actually, I can see who's muted, and if you want to watch, if I want, let me watch who raises a hand, so that way we don't have any visual distractions as well.
So how do you get to the gallery thing though? I just see you, that's it.
You just see me?
Yes.
So I'm not sure how your screen is looking, but if you look at the bottom, maybe you could click where it says all participants there. It might open up everyone for you.
Yes, it opens up with the names only.
In the right-hand corner, there should be an option between speaker view and gallery view. Trying to think of how it looks like on the phone.
Commissioner Salian, are you using a computer or a cell phone?
I'm using a cell phone.
Yeah, that might have limited capability.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Okay, well, just if you're using your cell phone, I think we could be okay with that. Just know that all sounds kind of are heard.
Uh-huh.
So anything happening in your background will kind of interrupt the meeting if it's, loud or anything. So if there's a way for you to mute on your phone.
Yes.
That would make it easy. Just forget to unmute when you want to participate, right?
Sure.
And I think we're all here, so we can actually call this meeting to order. 6:05, should we wait another 5 minutes?
No, I don't think we need to. I think everybody's here.
Sounds good.
Last question, how to raise your hand?
Are you on the phone, Commissioner, or on the computer?
On computer.
On the computer. There is under where you click at the bottom, it says participants. You can click on that, and there is a little side panel that opens up with everyone's name. If you look at the bottom, it'll give you, an option to invite, to mute yourself, or to raise your hand.
Yes, I'm using Mac, so I only when I click the participants.
Okay.
Hold on, let me see.
So maybe we can have you raise your hand physically. That was a good idea, Patty.
I found it.
Okay, perfect. So with that, let's just go ahead and call this meeting to order. We can begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to its republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for posting that. That's great.
Whose idea was that?
That is fantastic. We can move on to roll call. Hi, Vice Mayor Nuiens. I see you there now.
Hello, hello.
Okay, I'll start with the roll call. Chair Martinez.
Here.
Vice Chair Desha. I don't see. Commissioner Salian.
I'm here.
Commissioner Liu.
Here.
Commissioner Kong.
Here.
Commissioner Sexton.
Here.
And then I did already share Commissioner Shreve. Let me know a little about 30 minutes ago that he's unable to attend. He has some school district business he has to deal with as a result of recent power outages and such. So he sends his regrets and hopes everyone's safe. And Vice Mayor Nunez.
I'm here.
Great, and then with that, we'll move to the seating of the alternate. So alternate Commissioner Lingle, you're here. Great, and you will be officially seated for this meeting. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay. We can, there we go. We can move over to section 5, the approval of the agenda for August 19, 2020. Do I hear a motion to approve? And if I can get a first and a second.
I can make the motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Kong. Can I get a second?
Hey,
Oh, Mr.
Aye.
Commissioner Salien's gesturing to approve. Thank you. Commissioner Sexton, I believe you had an item to bring up. And I don't know if this is a good point for you to bring that up so that we can add it to the agenda as a point of discussion.
I think that probably when we get down to maybe announcements or the later in the agenda, I think that it's a request to add something to the agenda for a future meeting, because I believe, and I believe, Elaine, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that in order to put anything on the agenda, it needs to be published ahead of time before the meeting, before it can be discussed. So it can't be discussed this meeting, but it can be a request to be put on the agenda can be made at this meeting.
Okay, perfect. That's noted, and I will bring that up at that point. We have section 6. I guess we're approving the meetings.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Martinez, you have a first and a second for approving the minutes. You do need to take a vote.
Do we?
Oh,
okay.
I'm sorry, I need to do a roll call vote. So let me do that. So Chair Martinez, aye
Here.
or
Aye.
nay? Aye, okay. Commissioner Salian,
aye.
Commissioner Liu,
Aye.
Commissioner Kong,
Aye.
Commissioner Sexton,
Aye.
Commissioner Lingle.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Moving on to section 6 for the approval of the minutes of May 20, 2020. Do I hear a motion to approve? And can I get a first and a second?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Sexton. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Liu.
Let me go through the roll call vote quickly then.
Yes.
Chair Martinez,
Yay.
Commissioner Salian,
Yay.
Commissioner Liu,
Aye.
Commissioner Kong,
Aye.
Commissioner Sexton,
Aye.
Commissioner Lingle.
Aye.
Thank you.
Perfect. Section 7, public forum. I don't see anybody
So-
else logged in. Is that?
Chair Martinez, we had public was allowed to send requests through a form, and I'm checking the email. So we do have 2 comments that I can read out loud now.
Okay.
So our first comment is from Lisa Oliver, and she wrote, "The effects of climate change are no longer predictions. They are here and now. We are suffering devastating wildfires, record-breaking heat, rolling power outages, and the ice shelves in Canada and Greenland are melting to a point of no return. We are quickly losing time to reduce carbon emissions, yet we still have not entered into a crisis mindset. As the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us, the sooner we act, the better." Then she has 3 questions. The first one is, will the updated Milpitas Climate Action Plan align with other published targets, such as Menlo Park's goal of carbon neutrality by 2030, or the House Select Committee goal of net zero emissions economy-wide by 2050. Her second question is, in order to meet net zero goals in the next 10 to 30 years, buildings will have to be electrified and made efficient. Milpitas in the past has chosen not to require electrification of existing construction. There are many more existing structures than new. Will the city reconsider this decision? And then the third question is, has the city considered supporting the Circular Economy Plastics Bill, SB 54 and AB 1080? These bills will greatly reduce plastic production, greenhouse gas emissions, and tremendous problems of plastic waste in our environment. And then she noted that Senator Bob Wachowski was a co-author of the bill. And that is the end of her comment.
How do we proceed with their comment at this point? I think she brings up some very exciting things to look into and to respond to. I'm particularly, interested in the SC 54 and the AB 1080. So can we note those for points of discussion, or do we at this point?
So at this point, Chair, for public forum, any public comments that are read and the commission does not have to take action on it right away. Some of the items will be covered under the climate action plan update later on the agenda. So I think you will have a chance to talk through some of that later.
Perfect.
So we have one more comment. This is from Yervish Mehta. Excuse me if I'm saying the name wrong. And the comment is, will Milpitas City Council consider the program based on wind and solar technologies to improve street light programs? Also, conserving energy should be the goal of the city, as well as addressing electricity and fire. It would be better to set the citywide program to conserve. The water, landscaping, sprinkler, and irrigation would be helpful. And that is the end of that comment.
Very good comments that were actually sent in from our public. So with that, can we move to section 8 for the announcements? Any announcements?
Just a question there, though. Will these comments be included in the minutes or forwarded so that I can reread it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
they'll be included in the minutes.
Thank you.
Any announcements? Section 8.
Yes, I have one announcement. I would like to encourage everyone to participate in the county's Coastal Cleanup 2020 program that's happening next month. I've already signed up, and because of the pandemic, they're having to do this differently this year. And you basically sign up and pledge to clean up your neighborhood. You sort of go out by yourself or go out with your family members. And they provide great instructions on how to stay safe when you're, picking up litter and stuff like that. But I would definitely encourage people to sign up. It's happening every Saturday in the month of September from 9 a.m. to noon, 12 noon. And I think it's a good way for us to, be at home and help out the neighborhood look better, since we are basically, for the most part, confined to our neighborhoods to be able to enjoy a litter-free walks. So I think that would be great to do. And Elaine, I don't know if you have that listed in your, things to do on the sustainability page. Actually,
Commissioner Linda Grant's already working on that. She's been coordinating with Valley Water, and we'll be launching kind of complimentary outreach about the event or the month-long event in the next few weeks. And she'll be adding, I think we already have a web page set up. And we're also coordinating with Valley Water to get some supplies that we can distribute locally for Milpitas residents. So you actually lead us to an announcement.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. And, hopefully people will get excited and participate. And I see that I've noticed over the last few months, a lot more people getting active on Nextdoor. So I think when you post information from the city onto Nextdoor, more people are seeing it now.
Great, thank you.
That's great. I believe Commissioner Salian had a
Yes,
announcement.
I have a question over here. Okay, I just heard about that net zero. We are trying to get net zero from the. I would like to know is how is city helping the homeowners to get net zero, or how are they participating into it?
Sure. So part of that includes encouraging residents to install solar and battery storage. So we're working with Silicon Valley Clean Energy and promoting some resources for that. So we'll continue to kind of get more information out on how homeowners can electrify their homes and have net zero homes in the future.
But the city gives some incentive for all these things?
Right now, the city does not have access to funds for incentives, and that's why we partner with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, because they through their programming and their sales of clean energy are able to redirect some of that money back into rebates and funding for staff, for homeowners.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sexton, do you have another announcement? I see your hand still up. No? Okay. Anything else? No? Okay.
I'll unmute. I don't know if this would be, is there another time to bring up the future agenda items, or is this a good time to do it? Elaine, I just wanted to figure out.
Elaine, as a point of order, I think we should probably do it as part of an announcement, since we're also responding to questions.
Okay.
Yeah, this is fine.
All right. So I have noticed, and again, it's on Nextdoor, there've been several comments from Milpitas residents who are now working from home, like so many of us are doing, that because they have conference calls and Zoom calls and things like that, that some people get interrupted while they're trying to work by the very loud gas leaf blowers that is happening in their neighborhood while they're trying to get work done. And so I think that it's a point that we should try to address through the commission. And so I'd like for an agenda item to discuss that, particularly discussion of the city's residential noise ordinance, to make sure that we have enough outreach to the community so they understand that a noise ordinance during daylight hours is in effect for the city, and how to work around that. And then also to discuss the benefits of not using gas leaf blowers would be something good to discuss. It's a very large topic. And so I think that if I can make a suggestion that we set aside an agenda item at a later meeting to discuss it.
Okay, and I believe this does require a motion to approve.
Can I offer a suggestion on how to handle this? I think we have later this year, the commission will be developing its work plan, which does need to be approved by council. So I think probably putting this on the commission work plan for next year, you as the commission have your discretion of when you want to plug it in to a 2020, the commission meetings next year. And that probably would be the best way of handling it, if that's okay with you guys.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And, noise pollution, I think, is becoming quite the issue.
Right.
Okay.
With everybody at home right now, it makes a big difference, right?
Yes.
I'd suggest actually widening it a little bit. You mentioned, everybody working from home because of COVID, but in fact, I mean, this model of working from home is a great way to improve our pollution, to limit our pollution in general. So it might be good to not only discuss, how noise pollution could be reduced to facilitate folks for working from home, but other ways to, improve the quality of life of the neighborhood as everybody works from home. One suggestion I had was, my gosh, I go up to the park, often, and it'd be great to have, food trucks or, some kind of a refreshment up there. There's lots of people up there now, and that may be another topic. We may want to widen the topic to talk a little bit more about, improving quality of life of working from home.
Again, I think that would be a great conversation to have as the commission talks about its work plan its next work plan. And then you can either bifurcate it or broaden it, kind of whatever the commission desires.
Sounds good. So we'll leave that for the work plan project. And in the meantime, we'll proceed with the business items. We have section A, street sweeping, the pilot program update.
Great. I'm just going to do a quick introduction. I want to introduce two new staff who joined the city of Milpitas in the midst of this COVID pandemic and our shelter-in-place order. We have a new senior administrative analyst over our solid waste program. That's Mevan Cool Seaman. She joins us from the city of, oh my gosh, I just blanked on that. Newark, right? Just, yep. Yeah, city of Newark, where she was a senior analyst there for their public works department. She got to take on a special assignment and work on solid waste and their contract, and she loved it so much she jumped at the opportunity to join Milpitas when we had a full-time position for senior analysts focused on just solid waste and recycling issues. So she joined us at the beginning of March. Prior to working with the city of Newark, she worked for the city of San Jose for their Strong Neighborhoods initiative. So I'm super excited to have her on our team. I also want to introduce our administrative analyst, Alan Ha, who joined in April and has been working from home since he started, although he has made an occasional appearance to support us. Alan actually has a lot of solid waste experience. He has worked as a deputy director for the San Jose Conservation Corps. He's also done consulting for a lot of municipalities on zero waste events, as well as waste characterizations and sorts. So super excited to have our strong solid waste team in place finally. And they will actually be taking a lead on the next two presentations. First, they'll be talking about a street sweep it pilot program that we're starting to research and develop. And then the next presentation is on updates to Senate Bill 1383. So I'm going to hand it over to me then now.
Okay, hi everyone. It's nice to meet you. I'm one half of the solid waste team, is what Elaine was saying, and Alan is the other half. So he and I will actually be tag teaming throughout this presentation back and forth to update you on the street sweeping pilot program. So next slide, please. Why are we here? So this project was approved in the fiscal year 1920 capital improvement plan. It's a council requested project, and it's also a priority. The budget is $400,000, and really, the program is to address a couple of different items, dealing with street sweeping, neighborhood beautification, reduction of litter impacts to the waterway. We do have a trash reduction plan in place, so this would help with that, and make it the program more effective, because what's happening now is with the cars being parked there, the street sweeper isn't able to effectively go in and clean those streets. So that's the genesis of this program. I will turn it over to Alan for the next piece.
All right, great. Next slide, please. Wonderful. So there are effectively two primary issues that are driving in the pilot. The first is allowing curb access to the street sweeper in order to properly clean the streets, which will in turn actually impact the second issue, which is litter accumulation. Because if we're able to properly sweep up the streets in the neighborhoods, it will reduce the amount of litter on the streets, entering the storm drains and therefore the watershed. And this would have a cascading effect, and it will impact the visual appeal of the neighborhoods. And better visual appeal pretty much would help in deterring people from littering in the first place, because studies have shown that once a certain threshold for blight and degradation has been reached, people are much more likely to engage in activities such as littering and illegal dumping. Likewise, if an area stays clean, people are much more likely to try and keep it that way. Next slide, please. So through this pilot, we are trying to take in a variety of different factors to account for the selection of the pilot neighborhoods. The two largest factors that are weighted are the areas identified by the city's trash load reduction plan and as being impacted by high levels of street litter and parked vehicles. And number two are areas identified by Milpitas Sanitation, that is MSI. Where parking impacts the ability for the street sweeper to access the curb. There are other factors that we're also considering as well. These two are the heaviest ones. Other factors include the number of single family units versus multifamily units in a neighborhood, the geographic location, and also different street types. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it back on over to Miban.
Okay, so research. We have been researching different jurisdictions throughout the Bay Area to really get a feel from them what's been working, what hasn't been working, and then to see what would kind of be the best practices here in Milpitas as we start this program too, or are thinking about starting it. This is just a snapshot of the jurisdictions that we looked at. There are more than this, but these three ones are the ones that we really zeroed in on. Union City, Hayward, and San Jose, specifically Union City. And what we're really talking about here is street sweeping, no parking signs. So Union City had a very robust program. About a quarter of their streets have permanent signage. Hayward also has sections, as does San Jose. And we're also talking about residential areas in case that wasn't clear. We looked into the different entities that are performing the street sweeping itself. Here in Milpitas, we use Milpitas Sanitation. So they're our hauler and they do the street sweeping on our behalf. We checked about the frequency, the strategy for parking during street sweeping, because that was a big concern, especially with COVID and a lot of, everyone sheltering in place right now. There was concern about, well, where do I park if there's no parking on street sweeping days? So one of the things that other jurisdictions have done is splitting the street, meaning they do one side of the street on one day and then they switch to the other side. So that way, you know, if you're parked on that street, you can just move your car to the other side of the street and there's less of a parking impact. We also looked at the enforcement entity and the process that they use for enforcement, as well as their municipal code and their regulatory authority and the citation amount as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think this is Alan, so I'll turn it.
Wonderful. So now that the good thing about doing all this research is that we found out that we have a lot of infrastructure already in place to help support this pilot program. In regards to the municipal code, we don't need to adopt any new codes to support the program. From the research information that was presented earlier, we're able to identify a specific muni codes that are already in place that will help us support and enforce the pilot program. The two on the screen right now are just two of the most applicable ones, and it's generally what's utilized in other cities, but there are actually many more that we came across during our research of what's available. Next slide, please. In addition to that, within the fiscal year 2021 adopted master fee schedule, we were able to find under the police department and a citation amount that could be utilized as part of the program's enforcement procedure. We already had a chance to confirm with PD the accuracy of the citation amount, so we know that is valid and it could be utilized should it come down to that. Next slide, please. And of course, I was talking about street sweeping. And working with MSI, all the neighborhoods already have a set schedule for the street sweeper to conduct their cleaning. And this slide shows just one of the schedules that's already in place and provided through MSI's website. Through some of our initial conversations with MSI, we already discussed several options that could be employed so that the pilot locations and are able to be addressed without any disruption to service whatsoever. Next slide, and I'll turn it back over to you, Mivan.
Okay, so Alan touched on this a little bit, but we have begun talks with Milpitas Sanitation because they are the ones doing the street sweeping. It was really important for us to make sure that we discuss the logistics, to make sure that things work or that we think they'll work. The street sweeper schedule, what the schedule would look like, coordinating outreach with them, and then also metrics and evaluation. We have things in mind for metrics and evaluation, and we really wanted kind of a reality check to see if that's possible on their end. Could they keep track of these numbers for us? The other thing that we're doing is forming an internal street sweeping pilot team. This is really, a cross-departmental project. So it would really be public works, the police department, finance, engineering, building and housing safety. And it's all of us that have different pieces to this puzzle to make sure that it's an effective program. So we really wanted to hear, what would work on their end, what wouldn't work, comments that they have from their, experience and knowledge in their divisions and departments. And then the last piece is to develop and track the budget. So $400,000 was set aside in the budget, and it's just making sure that we're monitoring that and staying in that budget. Next slide, please. So talking a little more about outreach, we did discuss traditional outreach versus social media, and we are focusing more on traditional outreach because social media, we put as a potential, and that was because they're, Facebook next door, those are citywide, and this is really a more tailored program. So we were looking at traditional outreach, which had the capabilities to really send out mailers or door hangers to people to really just outreach the specific neighborhoods that we identify. But, on the slide, you'll see a sample of what Milpitas Sanitation has for street sweeping. We would do something else, but we would coordinate with them. For example, I have pictures from them already of the street sweeper and just, tips from them for outreach. Next slide, please. Okay.
I think this one's me, right? And of course, we can have the greatest program in the world or the worst program in the world, but we won't know unless we are collecting metrics. So that's what we're actually going to be doing throughout the entirety of this process. We'll be collecting metrics, both old and new, to see whether or not we're making progress and to also gauge how successful the pilot program actually is. Standard metrics that we already collect include the number of curb miles swept and the volume or tonnage of material that is swept up or cleaned in by the street sweeper. There are other metrics that we're looking at as well, which also includes the number of citations issued, the percentage of the street that is blocked by vehicles, and we'll also be out there with a team that we're going to put together to do some visual assessments and audits to see what is the condition of the street. Is there improvement, and has there been improvements over time? And all of the metrics are going to be consolidated internally by myself and Miva, and we're working with the respective other departments as well as MSI to make sure that everything is collected in a way that is agreeable for everyone. Next slide, please. And Miva, I kick this back on over to you.
So the street sweeping program, in a nutshell, we were looking at signage, permanent signage, to be put in identified areas for street sweeping. Enforcement, so making sure that the cars are moved and that the street sweeper can really get in there and do a thorough cleaning of the street. We also discussed citation and penalties. And, you know, we are sensitive to everything that's going on right now and sheltering in place and parking as an issue. And so we discussed doing citations at first and warnings at first, citations after. So warnings and educating people at first to say, you know, instead of giving you a citation, please move your car. Consider this a warning, because we do realize that a lot of people are at home right now. And so we want to make sure that people know about the program and are educated and warned about it before we get to citations. Next slide, please. So the timeline, we're looking at a 12-month pilot project time, and really that's to capture all 4 seasons of the year, to see if there are differences there and to get a whole picture of the pilot. At the 3-month mark, you know, we have research in there, we have forming the internal project team, we have coordinating with Milpitas Sanitation, as well as working on implementations for the signage, the outreach and notifications, and then presenting to commissions such as this one. At the 6-month mark, we're looking to evaluate a kind of initial evaluation of the metrics, evaluation presentations. We look to have regular meetings with the project team to make sure that, you know, everyone is on the same page and that the project is going, and to see if there's anything that needs to be tweaked or changed. We have regular meetings with MSI, and we'll do the same with them. We'll check in with them to make sure that, you know, things are going as planned. And then Alan mentioned the ongoing field surveys. So we'll continue those and compile that information so that when the project's over after 12 months, we'll have a final evaluation, and we plan to do post-pilot presentations at that point as well. And final slide, please. And then this is just our information. So it's my email, Mivan Kusiman, and Alan's email there. So if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to us and let us know so that we can take those comments and concerns into consideration as we keep working on this project. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation and all of that information. I don't see any hands up, so it looks like, yeah, I thought they would start waving. Commissioner Lingle, it looks like you have a question or a point.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Let's see, on the studies from, you know, the other cities, Union City and all that, those who gave out citations, do you have any indication of the frequency of citations and whether any of them were disputed? Were there any history of disputes of citations?
Yes, so I spoke, it really depends on the city and what their priority is. So for example, when I spoke to Hayward, they have a very strong priority to enforce, and actually the citations become a source of revenue for them. And they use that revenue to then fund staff to keep the program going. So it's a very robust program over there with revenue generated as well that goes beyond their staff. But it's something that their city made as a priority. So I think for that, the enforcement piece, it really depends on, you know, how much you want to prioritize it and how much we want to do the enforcement. Hayward did also mention though that they gave citations at first in the first month to just get people on board and let them know what was going on before they hit it hard.
Yeah,
with this.
you mean warnings at first, right?
Right.
And then I'm sorry, the second piece of it.
Let's see, disputes, any kind of history of disputes?
Yes. So again, with Hayward, that's the one that I had a big conversation with them. So I remember, especially since their program was so robust. The person I spoke to did say that they had disputes. There's an appeals process there. He was the one determining whether to drop it or not. It sounds like a lot of the cases were, dropped. Really, it's the repeat offenders that are the ones that are higher priority for them to make sure that they understand that the cars need to be moved. And then also, for us, we do have an appeals process. So we're looking into that as well. I believe the city manager is part of that process. And then higher than that, there's also a court process that it would go to a court too. But hopefully, that's way down the line.
Right. One last question though. Let's see, on the signage, I assume that is just a general purpose, no parking when on street cleaning day, right? It's not a state specific kind of thing.
No, it's general. And so one of the cities that we looked at was San Jose, and it was an audit report that we had looked through. And one of their findings was that in the signs that had very tailored language, it was hard because if it goes out of, if it's out of date, then those signs need to be changed as well. So it's kind of this fine line between making it general but specific enough that people understand that their cars need to be moved.
Right. Thank you.
I have a question on the signage. So will the signage include like a URL that people can easily, on their smartphone or whatever, look up what the street sweeping schedule for that particular street is, so that presumably if they park their car there, they can check right away to make sure that it's not a problem to leave it there until the next day.
So
I think that's a good suggestion. One of the conversations we had with our traffic manager was to try to follow state regulations for these no parking signs so that they are enforceable. But I think we can look at outreach options or whether or not, and the signs are pretty high up. So we can also look at options whether we can put a QR code elsewhere on the pole or use that in our outreach materials to ensure that folks know when they can look at their street sweeping day. Some of the signage language also includes, the day of the week, as well as a time frame for when the no parking is enforced. So that will give them an indication of when they need to move their car by.
Okay, that's great that it gives the day of the week and the time.
And I see a question from Commissioner Liu.
Yes. So the question is the enforcement. So who will do the enforcement? Is it a street sweeping company they do the enforcement, or the city doing the enforcement, or we subcontract that to some other third parties who doing the enforcement and collecting the fines? That's the first question. The second question, I think, since we are trying out in a few hotspots, the city's goal is to serve the community, not policing the community. Are we considering making a poll to the neighborhood that they're going to thinking of putting that rule, and then let the neighbors decide whether they want it or not wanting it? That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Kong, I believe I see your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Should we answer the question first? So in terms of Commissioner Liu, your question about who enforces, that's part of why we have a citywide team and the police department's involved. And so it will be the police department, whether it's a police officer or a community service officer, but it will be within their purview to issue citations and enforce. That's their authority. And I'm sorry, I kind of missed the second part of your question.
Second part is, since the city's goal is to serving the community, not policing them. So for the few streets that we are trying out this new street sweeping, we consider doing a pooling on the neighborhoods, and based on their feedback, and we decide whether go forward on this street or not going forward.
You know what, we'll take that one under consideration. It will be part of the outreach to talk to the neighborhoods and to get feedback from this commission, the Community Advisory Commission, and the council subcommittee, the council's transportation subcommittee, as we start to kind of zero in more on pilot neighborhoods. And then kind of after the 12-month pilot and the evaluation, the council can weigh it. We'll decide whether or not to continue the program going forward, and part of that continued consideration will also include how we add additional neighborhoods to such a program, and whether or not polling is considered at that point.
And I think for the enforcement, I personally would not recommend using the police force for enforcement. They can easily subcontract that to some, if you want to enforce, subcontract to some other third-party company and let them issue the tickets. I think that's what other cities does.
Yeah, I would just want to add, like Elaine's already mentioned, with the work that staff is doing, we do not want to get ahead of council on the decision-making process on whether we can go with enforcement or we go with more of a ticketing process first. So we'll take the comments that are coming in under consideration, but at the end of the day, we still have to bring this program together and present it to council for them to give us a final direction on how to roll things out. So you guys are getting a first cut at seeing this information, and we definitely want to be able to go back to our council later on and say we have walked it through with this commission, and we've taken feedback from you folks here to make our program more robust. So really enjoying the feedback that's coming through. But I just want to make sure that when we leave this discussion today, we know that no decisions are really being made. We're just taking items under advisement for council to give us a final say on where to go with this.
And thank you for that. I'm sorry, Commissioner Liu, that I almost skipped over your responses there. I got carried away looking for hands here. Moving on to Commissioner Kong, I believe you had a question or a comment.
Yes, I do. So thank you, Myvan and Alan, for the presentation. I just wanted to see if you can also give us a bit of background as to what the MSI is doing today as far as being able to get the cars to clear during the sweeping days, because this is an issue, a recurring issue they've brought back to this commission for, I think, many years now. So do you know what they're currently doing?
And I'll speak a little bit at the end. So we meet with MSI regularly, and they, as part of our meetings, also a lot of outreach. Collateral is developed and run by us first. And a strong piece of what goes out are actually informational pieces relating to street sweeping, and please help us as make sure that the streets are clean. And here's a link to our street sweeping site so that you can look up your schedule and then help us by moving your vehicle. And are you aware of anything else? Because I know that this goes out pretty regularly.
Yeah, so street sweeping is a topic that comes up a lot. And whenever we receive any complaint or concern from residents about it, we contact MSI, and they're very responsive. So right away, they take a look at it and they send somebody out either that day or the day after, in my experience, to go look at the area and to redo it if needed. So they jump on the concern pretty quickly and try to take care of it.
Thank you. And then I have another part of the question would be from your evaluation of the other cities. As you mentioned, you brought back 2 examples that are very robust. Are there any other examples of cities that are able to do it within one day and not requiring a split day? Because I think that's where it adds to the confusion if which sections of the neighborhoods are going to be swept on a certain day, and that way it becomes clearer where people can park their cars, or whether or not your part of this program includes sending out maps to everyone in the city so that they know where they can park their cars during the days that they have to clear their own neighborhood?
Well, so one of the cities that I spoke to, and it was actually the last city that I spoke to, was city of San Mateo. They have a very, how do I put it? They're a very effective program, and that it's run like a well-oiled machine. And I say that because they're able to narrow down their timeframes to 2 hours. So really, their parking signs, their representative, their staff person was telling me that he's able to, let's say, put the signs up down a street. And at the beginning of the street, he'll say, 11 to noon. And then towards the end, let's say it's a really long street, then he'll say noon to 1. They're able to pinpoint it that quickly. But again, it's a big priority for their city and their council to have a very strong, they call it street cleaning and not street sweeping because it's such a big deal for them. And they also have technological things that I'm very impressed by, but it is one of their priorities and they were able to narrow it down. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that in our case, because we have a third party, a hauler do it, MSI do it. For them, it's in-house staff, so they have more control. In our case, doing it in 2 hours, that was very impressive of all the cities I've seen. So they were kind of an outlier in that sense.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Nunez, you had a comment or questions?
Yes, I did. So let me lower my hand first. It takes me a while. I just remember this from council. Always lower your hand first, so you don't forget. First, I want to thank this. That is more information than I've seen before, and I know this issue started here in this commission. So I appreciate all the work that's been done. That distinction, that last distinction you brought up, street sweeping versus street cleaning, is big. And it really does revolve around what are you trying to accomplish. I have a home down in Lakewood, and they do about that same thing. They can tell you within 4 hours when they're going to come to that street. And they have this little car that goes just in front of that street sweeper that tickets within 15 minutes of that street sweeper coming, and gives you a ticket, but also has a little horn on it to give you a warning to come out and move your car, because they really are more interested in cleaning that street than giving that ticket. And I was sort of amazed at that, but they do not want things washed into their waterways. That's really why they're doing it. So that's why I think what you're doing is great. Looking at all that information collected and doing all the different strategies you have listed. I'm really thankful that's to the extent that we're looking at this. At the end of the day, for me, as I watch things go down here and then out into the bay, I'd like to see fewer and fewer things washed out into that bay. I do say the issue with regard to parking, I think, is important because now that more of us are staying home, there really are fewer places for persons to park now. And then when we try to move all of those cars, there's going to be really almost no place left. And so I know that in that one city, again, is the only times they say for those few hours, you can park on your lawn, you can park here. They even say, ask your neighbor to park in their driveways for those periods of time. They really make it more of a community involvement so that you get to know your neighbor. And all it is just to get your car off of that street. So I just wanted to say I really appreciate what you've presented and the things you're doing. And the fact, Tony, you said you're going to go to other commissions, I think is really good, because I do believe it's more about street cleaning and not just street sweeping. So I just wanted to say those few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Nguyen. I believe Commissioner Sexton.
Yes, I just have one question. Maybe it's just more of a comment. It's regarding the metrics for measuring how successful the program is. I noticed that the, I guess it's the weight of the, or volume of the trash that the street sweeper picks up is part of the metrics. And I wanted to ask what consideration is there for the amount of debris that is on the street, that it would vary by the amount of, I guess, civic mindedness that people have about either not littering or littering excessively, and that can vary over time. So having a strict definition of measuring the quantity of debris that's picked up may have other things that is influencing whether that amount goes up or down. So I just wanted to ask if that is being considered.
Sure, let me take this one, Commissioner Sexton. I think that is being considered. I think that's why it's one of, a full set of evaluation criteria. So it's one of the things we'll look at is is a street sweeper able to, and can we track how much debris it's picking up over time and over the course of this pilot. But as Alan mentioned, we're also doing visual audits and visual assessments. So we will get a sense of whether or not over time the amount of litter in the street changes. As one of the things Alan said is if it's clean, there's a tendency for it to stay clean, versus if it's littered and stuff is accumulating, it tends to kind of accumulate more. So I think we're looking at it kind of holistically with all of the various evaluation criteria.
Okay, I don't see any more hands, so it looks like we can move over to section B, which is an update on SB 1383 regulations.
Sure, and I think there's another slide presentation for this one, and Mivan's going to take lead on this presentation.
Okay, so I am here to discuss Senate Bill 1383 with you. Let's see, I see this slide coming up. So I'm
so sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt. Linda had mentioned that there was a public comment on that item. So before we move on to the next presentation, Linda, why don't you go ahead and read the public comment?
Sure. So Yurvish Mehta said, along with the street sweeping pilot to consider, he would like the city to consider e-waste and zero waste, recyclables, papers, and cans, bins throughout the city program for citizens, collect wood, mattress, and other things. Consider Milpitas sanitation application for residents to report waste within the city. Consider warning, citation, and penalty for recyclables, and liquid restroom facility within the city to eliminate odor and reduce paper waste.
All right, thanks for reading that, Linda. I think we can now officially move on to the presentation.
Okay, so SB 1383. This ordinance, it's a significant ordinance. It's coming from the state, from CalRecycle, and it's really the largest mandate to be adopted in California in the last 30 years. So this really, in the past 2 years, in a lot of the meetings that I've been in, this has been the big elephant in the room. And I feel like as time goes by, the elephant just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Just a quick disclaimer here, this presentation was by CalRecycle, and they really gave it out to all the jurisdictions to try to get the word out and to spread education and let people know that this is coming. So I did modify it a little bit with Alan. I can't take credit for it, but yes, if you could bear with me through the presentation, it's a lot of information, and I'll try to get us through it. Next slide, please. So the presentation roadmap, we'll be talking about the background and context of SB 1383, the requirements, taking a look at the big picture, as well as the key implementation dates, as well as what Milpitas will be responsible for. We'll look at the key jurisdiction deadlines, as well as the regional capacity and infrastructure considerations. And then lastly, CalRecycle's oversight responsibilities. Next slide, please. So looking at the background and context of SB 1383, as you can see on the slide, in California, there's a lot of food insecurity. And the statistic here is that 1 in 8 Californians and 1 in 5 children are food insecure. California throws away more than 6 million tons of food waste every year. And in 2017, California disposed of approximately 20 million tons of organic waste. So if you look at the pie chart, you can see that non-organic waste is only about 1/3 of that. And really 2/3 of that is organic waste. So what we're talking about here is green waste, wood waste, food waste, and fiber, such as paper and cardboard. And you'll see there specifically that food waste is 18%. So this is the food aspect part of it. There's an edible food recovery target, which we'll delve into a little deeper later on. Next slide, please. The other piece of SB 1383 is the environmental component. So we're talking here about methane gas, and a lot of people don't realize that there is a connection between organic waste in landfills and climate change. So you can see on the slide here that landfilled organic waste emits methane gas, which is considered a super pollutant, and it's more powerful than CO2. Methane gas contributes to change in California, and some of the examples that are given here in the slide are rising sea levels, reduced snowpack, wildfires, drought, and heat waves, some of which are very kind of on our minds nowadays. Next slide, please. So just a fact about that is that landfills are responsible for 21% of the state's methane emissions, and it's the 3rd largest producer of methane, landfills are. So this slide talks about SB 1383. It was passed in 2016, and it's been in the rulemaking process since then. We're at the final stages of that process, and we're really waiting for the final regulations to be adopted. So we're told it's any day now, and we're looking at early fall from what I've heard recently. If you look at the slide in 2020, there's a kind of a check-in goal where CalRecycle wants to see 50% reduction in landfilled organic waste. And they just released yesterday a report from a waste characterization to see the progress report of SB 1383, if we did meet that or not. So I'm currently reviewing that since they just released it, but they are looking at it and analyzing it. The big thing here is that in 2022, about a little less than 18 months from now, the regulations take effect. And their 2 main goals are a 75% reduction in landfilled organic waste and a 20% increase in food recovery of currently disposable edible food by 2025. Next slide, please. This is just a visual timeline of the things that I've mentioned before, that the regulations were adopted in 2016, we're in formal rulemaking. Regulations are to be adopted any day now from what I'm hearing from CalRecycle. And there is that 50% reduction of organic waste, that's kind of the goal. And CalRecycle is analyzing that to see what the progress is on that. The 2 takeaways here are that on January 1st of 2022, the regulations take effect and state enforcement begins. And then in 2024, the regulations require that local governments take enforcement as well. Next slide, please. So here, looking down into the jurisdiction's responsibilities, these are really the different buckets that SB 1383 hits that Milpitas will be responsible for. The later slides go through these in more detail, so we'll just skip over this slide. So the first thing is, the first jurisdictional requirement is to provide organics collection and service to all residents and businesses. The good news here is that we already have an organics program in place. We're currently using a 3-container system here. The regulations do talk about a 1-container or 2-container system, really depending on the jurisdiction. But here we do use the three containers, and they're color coded according, actually it matches with SB 1383 regulations too that require the color coding. What we really want to do here is just to continue to strengthen the program and to make it more robust. So that's already, fortunately, one of the things that are in place. Next slide, please. Another jurisdictional requirement is the edible food recovery program. So this really will be a collaborative effort. When it comes to things like food recovery, it's something that we'll need to talk to many different entities and agencies about because it crosses jurisdictional lines. It crosses fields. There's a lot of crossing between different sectors here. So we'll really be talking to a lot of local governments, participating in those conversations, the food banks, the food delivery services, the health department, food recovery kitchens, and it'll just be a part of a larger conversation that we all have regarding these requirements and how we as a region can meet them. Next slide, please. There is a requirement to conduct education and outreach to the community as well. It's an annual requirement, and this is something that we'll work closely with Milpitas Sanitation. They already have an infrastructure in place, and we want to supplement that and see what we can do to add to that and make it a stronger kind of education and outreach program to let people know that this is coming, because it is a pretty significant change for everybody. Next slide, please. The procurement is one of the other buckets. And what this means is that each jurisdiction will be assigned a procurement threshold that we'll need to meet. So CalRecycle has a formula where they take into account population versus their different thresholds, and they'll factor that in to give us kind of what we need to meet, what our threshold is. To do that, the staff will need to review current policies. We'll need to see what needs to be updated to align with SB 1383. We'll need to really reach out to purchasing, to other divisions. In public works, we have fleet with renewable energy sources. We have compost and mulch that we'll need to talk about park staff with, and then there's a recycled paper, not only copy paper, writing paper, but then janitorial supplies as well, that paper. So there's a lot of talking with other people to make sure that we're all on the same page here, we all understand the requirements, and to see where we're at currently with the requirements and where the gaps are and what we'll need to do to meet that threshold. Next slide, please. This next requirement is a big one for Milpitas. It's monitoring compliance and to conduct enforcement. So this slide here really talks about, it's listed in order of time urgency. So by 2022, we'll need to adopt ordinances that have enforceable mechanisms. What the regulation is and what the state is trying to do is to give people more teeth, to give the regulation teeth. So they're really looking at enforcement and compliance with the enforcement, and they want every jurisdiction to have ordinances in place that we can lean back on when it comes to enforcement. The big piece of it after that is compliance and monitoring education for the next 2 years. So Milpitas would be responsible for compliance reviews, annual reviews, route reviews. So really looking at samples on certain routes and seeing what the contamination is. And if there is contamination, then there's a requirement to get out there and do outreach to the people on those routes to say, hey, there's contamination here. Here are the proper ways to recycle or to do organics recycling, and to inform people of how to comply with these new laws. There's also inspections to verify edible food recovery efforts, and then a lot of it's education to let people know, here's this regulation, what do you need to do to comply with it? So that's from 2022 to 2024. 2024. And then the last piece of it is the jurisdictions themselves have the authority to do notice of violations and to have more enforcement for that area. And that's what the state kind of is looking to cities to do, is to enforce it. Next slide, please. So this is really just an FYI slide, because there are regulations for construction and landscaping requirements. The good news is that we are already doing it. So for construction and demolition for Cal Green, that's something that Milpitas has adopted already in 2019, so we can check that box off. And then as for the Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, it was adopted in 2015. There were amendments. So right now we're just trying to confirm that the amendments align with SB 1383. And so that's kind of half checked, I would say, but we're getting there. Next slide, please. So the infrastructure requirements, again, these are more of a regional county requirement. So it's something that we'll be participating in talks with, but really the county will be leading the effort on a regional basis to make sure there is enough capacity to take in all of these solid waste that's been collected, organics waste that's been collected. Next slide, please. So here, the last big requirement for Milpitas would be record keeping requirements. We have to maintain records and to report to CalRecycle. So in practice, that means doing an annual compliance report, and then also doing ongoing tracking of, everyone who is currently collecting organic waste, from residents to businesses to multifamilies, making sure that they're complying with the program, checking for the contamination. And if there is contamination, then letting people know, here are the things that you can do not to contaminate or to properly recycle. Basically, we need to keep records of everything. And one of the things that we're doing here is talking to different, seeing what other options are out there to use technology. So software programs that could be available that would help us with the tracking and to help make it kind of a consistent tracking across the board to across other jurisdictions that may be using it across the state. Next slide, please. So these are the key jurisdiction dates in 2022. It's really 2022 and 2024. So in 2022, it's establishing the program, conducting the education and outreach, making sure the procurement is, the mechanisms are in place there, making sure that the county is working on the capacity planning and that we'll have enough capacity as this program across the state gets stronger and more people are collecting organics and providing services. And then in 2024 is when the state will look to the different cities to make sure that we're doing enforcement. I do have a caveat here, though, that with everything that's going on with COVID, there's been a lot of concern because of the ramifications and the impacts that all the cities have been feeling from budget and everything else, staffing and everything else due to it. The implementation date is still approaching. So CalRecycle did release some guidance last week, and they said that the gist of it is they said that although the dates will remain the same for the deadlines, they are considering all extenuating circumstances, and it seems like they're pretty sensitive to that as well, what residents and what jurisdictions are feeling. Next slide, please. And so the last slide really is state enforcement. Besides the city and the enforcement that we have, CalRecycle also has authority from SB 1383. So they have the authority to authorize waivers, to oversee and monitor state facilities and agencies mainly. So one example would be the prison system. Also local education entities, agencies. They can oversee and monitor compliance, so they can really step in there if they wanted to help conduct joint inspections with jurisdictions. They have the ability to review an implementation record. So we have to always have those ready in case they want to take a look at it. And then for violations, to issue violations. But again, they are very aware of the concerns that residents and jurisdictions have had due to the impacts that we've been facing lately. So they have stated that they will take into account extenuating circumstances when it comes to enforcement. And then the last slide is just my information. So that first little link up there, that's if you want to be on a listserv for SB 1383. They actually provide pretty good updates and information. That's how I've been able to see all the guidances and the reports that have come out. Their website is actually a really good source for information. And, you know, if you can't write it down, then what I do is just Google CalRecycle SB 1383, and it leads you to that site. So it's a good source for the regulation and what the state is looking for, and educational tools and information. And then my email is there in case you have questions and want to reach out to me for that.
Thank you for that presentation, Mivan. Any recommendations or any questions? I have one quick one, which was, I noticed CalRecycle has the authority to provide waivers. Can you provide an example of what type of situation would allow for a waiver?
Yeah, so the one situation that comes to my mind is they're called de minimis waivers, and they're basically a waiver that says, you know, I don't create enough organics to have this apply to me. So that would be an example of a waiver.
Okay, thank you for that response. Commissioner Kong, you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I do. So back in 2016, when this SB 1383 was passed, I think that has become one of the main goal of where Milpitas City has kind of overhauled its solid waste, you know, systems as far as service in order to meet this 1383. So as you go through a lot of this timeline and regulation, do you know how much of the work is already being captured under the contract with Milpitas Sanitation? Because it was, I guess, maybe a lot of our understanding is that many of the tracking to meet state compliance would fall under Milpitas Sanitation, or is there still a lot of gap that City of Milpitas really needs to, you know, plug?
So the regulations were approved in 2016. The rulemaking process has been long. It's been a 2-year process. So when the franchise agreement, it does, with Milpitas Sanitation, it does reference SB 1383. So that's a really good thing that it does mention that for outreach and for other pieces. But I believe the regulations have been changing in the last 2 years. So really, you know, the way that it looks now, I think with the timing of when the franchise agreement happened in Milpitas versus the timing of the regulations now, I think there was a difference there. So even though SB 1383 was referenced back then in our franchise agreement, I think it's hard to tell exactly what that looked like at that time. So now we know that there's, you know, a lot of these record implementation requirements and all these other requirements. And even though there are some references to that, there's a lot of kind of gap needs that needs to be analyzed, what needs to be coordinated between us and MSI. And that's something that, you know, it is an ongoing conversation that we have with them.
And let me go ahead and just jump in here. I think clearly the way the franchise agreement with MSI was set up puts us in a really good position to be in terms of implementation of SB 1383. I think, you know, our food scraps program, the work that Milpitas Sanitation has done to roll out organics and food waste for businesses and the commercial sector has really, like I said, put us in a good position. There are other aspects to SB 1383 that aren't necessarily addressed by what already makes its way into a garbage container. One of the things that Mivan talked about was edible food waste and edible food recovery, where you're actually trying to go after grocery store food that is still edible, not what is getting disposed of, but what can be recovered and repackaged and provided to those communities that are food insecure and who don't have access to food, very readily. So there is, that work that has to be done. We are working with the county on a pilot program that also rescues food from corporate campuses and a lot of the cafeterias, kind of repackaging food from Facebook and their cafeteria. And actually they have a food truck that goes out and takes that repackaged food and makes it available in low-income communities. So kind of looking at piloting those programs and expanding on those are some of the things that aren't kind of part of necessarily the franchise agreement. So there is still, as Meedan said, some gaps and some additional work, but we are in a good spot because of how the franchise agreement was set up.
Thank you. And I think even going through this pandemic, there has been a lot of learning from many of the food suppliers as to how to redirect some of this excess food when they could not sell in the stores. I think there's definitely, in terms of timing and leverage from what has been going on in this current situation, will all lend to ideas to make the food recovery effort a lot more robust.
Oh, yes. And even food waste prevention. I think a lot of people have taken to really trying to eat through everything that's in their refrigerator and leftovers and making it last as long as possible, whether they're pickling or freezing or doing things. So yeah, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Lingle.
There it is. Let's see. So I'm still not quite clear on what is actually being, when it comes to jurisdiction and what is being enforced. It sounds like, there's definitely, enforcement engaged here, and it seems like it's, oriented towards the residents. And so that goes with Ms. Kong's questions about who is actually, going to be doing this. Is it primarily, enforcement, well, not primarily, but is residential enforcement part of the equation here? And is Milpitas, or maybe even the county? It's not clear to me, who has the actual jurisdiction when it comes to that kind of thing. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what actually is being enforced here?
Yes, so the enforcement is for everybody, which is why this is such a significant policy, because it's not just single family, it's businesses as well. It's everyone. So in the enforcement, they're really looking for jurisdictions. So in this case, Milpitas, we would need to adopt ordinances with enforcement mechanisms to really give us the authority to go out there and be able to cite or give notice of violations or whatever is needed to get people to comply. I do want to clarify that the targets are a statewide target, so it's not a per jurisdiction target, but Cal Recycle, as a part of that, is in order to meet their statewide targets, they're enforcing, that's why they're enforcing on jurisdictions to make sure that each jurisdiction has a program in place and that they basically have enforcement mechanisms that can then make their businesses, their residences, people actually do it to make sure that they meet their requirements.
And when it comes to compliance, we are talking about disposing correctly of organics in the compost bin, really. That's what it's down to.
Yes, and it's adding a food waste is kind of a big one that people have been talking about lately too. But yes, collecting food scraps is a big one as well.
Is there any emphasis in this bill on enforcement of the landfills themselves, as far as what kind of methane they emit?
Yeah. You know what? I haven't seen any. I can't think of any off the top of my head. It might be there, but honestly, I've been focusing on the jurisdictions enforcement. So it could be there, but I can't think of it.
Is there any chemistry list that indicates the worst offenders of food that triggers methane emissions?
Not that I know of. I know that Cal Recycle is working on, and I just heard this yesterday from them actually. They're working on a waste characterization study that also encompasses food waste, which they haven't had before. So they're hoping to slate that. It's supposed to be going now, but they're looking now a couple months from now because of everything that's going on, to start doing that study and to really look at food waste and to see exactly what it is that the categories are in food waste as well. So I don't know if they'll get down to the chemistry of things, but at least they'll get down to the different materials that they're looking at and the different kind of items that they're looking at.
I'm just trying to connect this to, you know, our odor problem and, you know, enforcement of, you know, perhaps something in in this bill that, you know, helps us connect our odor problem to, you know, the landfills themselves. So, thank you. That's all.
Vice Mayor Nunez.
Thank you. I always like to make these comparisons because it just helps me keep things in perspective. So back to the city of Lakewood. And first, you should I'm only there a month and a half a year. You know, they don't have really any separation. You get 2 bins, 3 bins, and at the end of the day, the food waste all goes in the same place as the trash from your house. And if you want to do organics, you know, they'll bring you another separate bin, you know, but I just think we're so much further ahead here. And because when it comes to this, I think you said 2022 is the implementation date. Lakewood's in for a rude awakening when those rules come out and we have to make a shift.
Yep.
It's going to be brutal up there. I think that we are so much closer to the end than they are, because they're going to start from zero. And hopefully we are much more than halfway there. So that's what I see is the important part to keep in mind. But I do have one question. You talked about the educational component for the citizens, because they may not see us starting, you know, beyond the halfway point because they're here. And so I think that's a really important aspect. Persons, when I talk to them, we'll still talk about these small changes. And I think all of this really is based on education. As long as we keep them informed, they will come along, because I think we're much more conscious about what's going around us environmentally. And so as long as we can continue with keeping them up to date with what we're doing, I think we're better off. But just keep in mind that I think maybe it's Northern California, but at least in Milpitas, we are much further along than they are in Southern California. Believe me, just the things tonight that I've heard tells me that we are 60 to 70% further along this journey than they are down south. And so we should congratulate ourselves just for that. So thank you.
That is true, correct. Commissioner Liu? Is he with us? Commissioner Liu, your mute button is on.
Thank you. I won't remember to lower my hand. So after Milpitas switched to the sanitation, what happened is most residents, they got a smaller garbage bin. And I have heard a lot of complaints from residents, including recently. So I feel like the residents does not know that just SB 1383 is coming, and they do not know the state mandate that there's a huge reduction effort that's needed by all the city residents. So I think the city, as part of the educational part, should tell the citizens, okay, here, this is not imposed by the city of Milpitas. This is not imposed by the Milpitas sanitation. This is imposed by the state, and that's good for everybody. So I would really want to emphasize that let's put information out to everybody to let them know repeatedly, okay, here it's coming. Then you need to be prepared. Yeah. Thank you.
Great, and thank you for that comment, Commissioner Liu, and Vice Mayor Nunez, kind of on the same note in terms of the importance of education. Do you want to just also point out that the City Council did approve with the fiscal year 2021 budget some additional funding to our solid waste program so that we can develop and implement an education program that does provide more information about these requirements and supplements what MSI is doing for their education. So you guys are ahead of the game, and we already are working on it thanks to the council's approval of that budget.
Commissioner Kong?
Yes, I just want to take this opportunity to kind of maybe answer what Commissioner Lingle was referring to as far as are there any rules surrounding reducing methane specifically for some of the waste management industry themselves. The one that I'm aware of is from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. They have been trying to develop new regulations surrounding the handling of organic compounds. But based on what I also know is that, I mean, City of Milpitas, we have also been engaged very closely with BACMED throughout the rules making process, but there has been pushback from the industry as far as the cost that's involved to implement many of the changes. And when I just went to the website, I saw that the rules making has been suspended. So I'm not sure where we're going with it, but I know that the next time we meet with BACMED in the quarterly meeting, we can definitely follow up to see what's the reason behind the suspension of that rule.
Thank you for that added information. I believe, Linda, you have a comment or a question?
Yes, we have a public comment, so I thought I could, if all the commissioners are done with this section, could read it out. Okay, so it's from Yervish Mehta, and he said, along with methane reduction, he would like the city of Milpitas to also look at carbon dioxide emissions. And I think, and then he specifically talks about CO2 tax and reducing vehicles, providing credit for natural gas reduction, reduction of CO2. He focuses on SB 1440 and SB 100, and he was interested in a platform where citizens can verify this, such as Cal Environment. I believe a lot of this will be addressed in our next agenda item, but thought I'd bring it up now.
I'm sorry, Chair, you're muted.
Well, that's great. I get control, lost control there. I was saying that it does look like we can move over to section C, which does cover a lot of the comments that Mr. Mecca brought up. So hopefully a lot of his questions or comments would be in that part.
Okay, great. I'm going to take this presentation. It's going to be fairly short compared to the last two, so, but I'm super excited to be able to share with you some progress and to talk about the schedule that we will be taking for updating the city's climate action plan. So next slide, please. I know it was one of the things I was hired to do by Tony was to update our climate action plan, and so like I said, I'm very excited to be able to start that. I'll give you a little bit of background. The City of Milpitas has a climate action plan. It was adopted by the City Council in May of 2013. And that was really focused and provided a roadmap and strategies for greenhouse gas emission reductions to meet the state's 2020 target. Here we are, 2020. And really it included just the actions to get us to 2020, which was a 15% reduction below our baseline levels, which would have put us back to 1990 emissions. Since 2013, there's been a lot of new technologies, new studies, and new and more updated statewide greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. These include an executive order issued by Governor Brown in 2018 that sets a goal for the state to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. And then prior goals to reduce emissions by 80% below baseline levels by 2050. And so one of the things that we recognized when we looked at the cap was it doesn't go that far, it only goes to 2020. And so we did recognize that we need to take the time to update the climate action plan, really give the community and the council the opportunity to weigh in on and set new long-term and midterm objectives for greenhouse gas reductions and identify some new near-term actions. Next slide, please. So we issued an RFP, a request for proposals, to bring on a consultant to support this effort. The proposal was released in January. We received 4 proposals in March 13th. Wow, I'm sorry. It just dawned on me that that was the day the shelter-in-place orders took effect. So that was very coincidental. We did complete as city staff a technical review and interviews with 2 finalists in May, and we did reference checks and came up with a selected consultant in June. Actually, at the council's meeting on August 4th, they did approve a contract with Ascent Environmental to support the city in its effort to update the climate action plan. Ascent was formed in 2010 to provide climate change planning and environmental consulting services. They've done a lot of similar work for municipalities and other agencies throughout California in terms of developing climate action plans, conducting CEQA analysis. They are also providing a lot of technical support to state regulatory agencies, including the Bay Area Air Quality Management District and the California Air Resources Board related to climate action and greenhouse gas emission reductions and quantification. And so we really did feel like they were a very strong company and one that could really support us in this effort. Next slide, please. So the scope of work for this consultant for Ascent is really to support the city in engaging our community throughout the update process. They will also be working with you all, the Energy and Environmental Sustainability Commission, and you guys will be their sounding board. You will serve as kind of their advisory committee going forward. So you will start seeing specific agenda items, and we will be bringing the consultant in to provide more information and get feedback from the commission. They'll also be working with us to host community workshops and do outreach, whether it's virtual or in person once that's allowed, and developing a community action toolkit, really giving resources to our residents for actions they can take both near term and long term to minimize their carbon footprint. The consultant will also be developing a greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the city. Part of this process includes needing to update our baseline year emissions inventory, which is 2005, as well as doing emissions inventories for recent years, as well as forecasting the emissions into the future, both kind of business as usual if we didn't take additional action, and then where the city would be with actions, goals, and objectives as laid out in a draft updated climate action plan. And so really their role is to support the city and the commission, as well as the city council, in establishing long-term vision, objectives, as well as near-term actions. They'll also be developing tools and training staff so that staff can continue to conduct the inventories going forward, monitor implementation, as well as report out on a more regular basis to the community as well as to the city council. One of the things we're also including with this update to the climate action plan is a chapter that addresses community resiliency and preparedness, kind of not just what the community can do to minimize or mitigate for climate action, but in terms of adapting to our changing climate, what community members can do to prepare as we're seeing now, the climate is changing, and we're really seeing the impacts in terms of heat events, extreme heat events, wildfires, drought, kind of all that. So really kind of needing to be more immediate with our adaptation actions and preparing for community resiliency. And then another action the consultant will be doing is creating a CAP consistency checklist. This is how we can streamline new development and look at how their project aligns with the updated CAP. Next slide, please. And so here's the schedule for next steps. We anticipate a kickoff meeting with the commission as well as with the internal kind of city staff steering committee in September. They will start working on the technical side in terms of developing our greenhouse gas inventories for our baseline year, which again was 2005, as well as 2017, 2018, and the future forecasts. Kind of once those inventories and forecasts are completed, we'll start identifying and analyzing what greenhouse gas emission reduction measures and actions can be taken, and start estimating the impacts of those collective actions. We anticipate a lot of community engagement with workshops and online surveys, et cetera, kind of from November through June. You can see we do have multiple meetings planned with the commission. We hope to have a council study session by next summer and adoption in September. So we have a fairly aggressive timeline in terms of trying to get this done within a year. But we also recognize that there is a great need to have this work done and to lay the foundation and start on future implementation. And that's it for my slides. I think I have one last slide that is really just to open this up for questions from the commission at this point on the upcoming process. I know you might have a lot of detailed questions, but know that you'll have more data and more information coming forward in the next few months.
Thank you for that. Just a quick note, I guess. One positive thing of being online is that I actually was able to look up Exit Environmental, and the qualifications of the staff that are there are really exciting, and to be able to gain that knowledge and experience for the city of Milpitas is something to really look forward to. So very positive side note to be able to be online, right? It looks like we have a comment or a question from Commissioner Kong.
Yes, general question, because I think in many jurisdictions within Bay Area, like San Jose, San Francisco, Oakland, and San Mateo, even Santa Clara County have all, declared an emergency resolution about climate crisis. Is there any position that City of Milpitas plan to take to kind of stress on this urgency?
That is something that the commission and can weigh in on. Again, you can add it to your work plan, kind of discussing whether or not to recommend that the city council consider adopting a resolution for declaring a climate emergency. And at this point, that's kind of where we are. Staff can do a little bit of work to kind of lay out who has adopted one and provide that information.
Thank you for that. It looks like we have a question or comment from Commissioner Sexton.
Okay, I can unmute myself. Just a quick thank you, Elaine, for putting together a plan and a schedule to get the climate action plan updated and with a thorough input from all the various departments and commissions and the public. So it looks like a comprehensive plan, and I'm eager to get started on it so that we can have the final product within the schedule that is established.
Commissioner Lingle?
Okay, I may have missed this. Okay, this is a plan. What is the period of the forecast? How far out does this go, or is this planned for?
Well, that will be partly up to the commission and the council and the community. Typically, these plans that I've seen most recently adopted by communities do set long-term goals for 2045 or 2050. And the projections usually go out through that. You know, laying out specific actions tend to be more near term because you can't really predict what you're going to be doing 15, 20 years from now, but really the projections will be at least through 2050.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. As Ms. Sexton says, you know, we really appreciate this coming online now. Very exciting.
And with that, I think we can go to section 10. Any city liaison reports?
Chair Martinez, we did have a public comment on this item.
Yes, if you can read that, please.
Yes. So this is from Mr. Mehta. He said that he wanted to note that the city of Minnesota and New York have signed up with the United States National Climate Alliance to ensure that they meet their reduction goals. And he was wondering if the city of Milpitas has considered taking such an action.
Elaine, are you familiar with this or?
I am not, but we can take that under consideration and look into it.
Okay, thank you. So we can move to section 10, city liaison reports. Any report for council members or report from staff?
Well, I can say that I've actually talked too much already, probably, so I have none.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Anything else from staff?
I think I have one last update. You guys, we did provide a lot of information, and I think you got insight into a lot of the work that's happening. One event, I know Patty had already taken the wind out of our sails with Coastal Cleanup Day. So I do want to remind everybody to sign up and make your pledge to participate in that. And then Linda's also been working on scheduling virtual sustainable landscape workshops. And we do have another one scheduled at the end of this month. Linda, can you remind me what day it is?
It should be on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday. And
Right.
it will be on edible gardening, transitioning your garden to a fall garden from a summer garden, and how to conserve water. And we've been posting about it on Nextdoor, Facebook, and Twitter.
Yes, and I do wanted to also send kudos over to Linda. She's been doing a great job. We've actually been seeing a lot of participation in these virtual classes, and I believe we partner with Alameda County Water District on this one. We already have 200 people registered, probably more than that at this point. That was as of the other day. So there's actually a lot of interest as folks are looking to find ways to be more food secure, minimize their trips to the grocery store. So I'm excited that this one is focused on kind of growing edibles as you transition into fall and winter. And that's all I had. Sorry, Chair, you're muted again.
I did it again. I muted and unmuted myself. Commissioner Liu, I can't tell if your hand is up from previously or if it's a new question or comment.
I have the comments. So a couple of months ago, I did a landscaping project for the water saving. I found it very easy because I only need to deal with this valley water, and then they have all the information I need. And now I'm doing I'm thinking of doing a solar panel to save to generate electricity. I found the information is everywhere and very daunting. For example, I don't know whether there's a federal rebate, or state rebate, and also there's a PGE, there's a Silicon Valley Clean Energy, but also other electricity provider I can choose. And I don't know for, let's say, should I make a bigger system or should I get a smaller system? So I wonder whether the city could put together, it's kind of a cheat sheet. Doesn't have to be very comprehensive, just a cheat sheet. Okay, every month or every quarter, update the cheat sheet. Okay, here, if you want to do this, here's my recommendation. In this way, it's making people's life easier, makes them easier to switch to using the either solar panels or to conserve water, etc. Yeah, that's my comment.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Liu. I will send you a link. Silicon Valley Clean Energy recently put together what they're calling an e-hub for electrification, solar, and electric vehicles. So they do have a tool called a solar assistant that can help you maximize your solar benefit. So I'll send you a link to that and you can take a look at it. I think I think it will be helpful. I think where it doesn't get to is it doesn't really recommend an installer for you. So that's kind of where you end up you do have to interface with installers and private companies. But this at least will help you with sizing and considerations for that.
Thank you. I think their information may be best because it's fixed on, okay, you have to use Silicon Valley Clean Energy, because I know that there's a lot of other energy providers you can opt to, for example. Yeah.
Okay, I believe we have a final hand up there from Commissioner Salen.
Hi, I was just wondering if Elaine could send me the same information, please. Email me the same information regarding that solar thingy.
Yep, I can send it out to all the commissioners.
Oh, okay, that would be better. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you for that, Elaine. And I think with that, we can move to adjournment. So if I can get a motion, well, I hear a motion to adjourn at this point. Can I get a first and a second?
First.
Commissioner Salen, first. Can I get a second?
I second.
Vice Mayor Nunez. And Elaine, do you take roll call at this point?
Yes, but I don't think that was Vice Mayor that seconded. I think that was Commissioner Lingle.
My apologies.
That's okay. You can just feel that I really wanted to, though.
It sounded like your voice.
Okay, yeah, let me take a quick roll call. Chair Martinez.
Yay.
Commissioner Salian.
Hey.
Commissioner Liu.
Aye.
Commissioner Kong.
Aye.
Commissioner Sexton.
Aye.
And Commissioner Lingle.
Aye.
Great. Wow, that did sound.
Thank you so much, everyone. And it was a pleasure meeting Mivan and Alan, at least virtually, hopefully personally soon. A great meeting you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, stay safe, everybody.
Welcome
Thank
back.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.